So Pokémon Scarlet and Violet are finally here, giving us our first taste of what a truly open-world Pokémon game could be like. And while many fans have been dreaming of this moment for years, has Game Freak actually managed to make our dreams come true? Let's not kid ourselves here. I think we've all seen the various videos online showcasing just how broken these games are. So the real question is, does the novelty of an open-world Pokémon game justify spending money on this clearly unfinished product that was rushed out in time to capitalize on the lucrative holiday season? These are my thoughts on the matter, based on my first 10 hours in the Paldea region.
Alright, let's just start by getting the biggest issue out of the way first, being the bugs, glitches, and performance issues present in these games. Now, while there are a lot of videos showcasing just how broken these games are, I will be focusing on just what I have experienced so far in my 10 hours of playing, and personally, I haven't experienced anything game-breaking yet. Although the most apparent issue that everyone is going to be facing if they decide to play these games will be the terrible frame rates. The optimization in these games is almost non-existent. The frame rate is constantly dipping by a noticeable amount, causing the game to constantly slow down, and on top of that, you're almost always going to be seeing the low frame rate animations for NPCs around you. You can definitely tell that corners have been cut in nearly every technical department in order to get this game running on the Switch. However, these issues are entirely inexcusable when you look at some of the other games that have released on the Switch. Other first-party games released by Nintendo, such as Mario Odyssey, Breath of the Wild, or the entire Xenoblade Chronicles franchise, all managed to run smoothly on the Switch while maintaining their graphical fidelity. While there are moments of frame dips in some of those games, it's nowhere near to the extent that it's present in Pokémon Scarlet and Violet. And I think it's clear that the reason for this is that Game Freak has never developed an open-world Pokémon game before, and as a studio in general, Game Freak is notoriously bad at optimizing Pokémon games. So combine their complete inexperience with creating an open world, with the tight deadlines set by the Pokémon company to release a new game every year, and what you get are Pokémon Scarlet and Violet. No matter where you are in the game, you are almost guaranteed to experience poor performance issues at all times, and this can lead to the game just outright freezing for a few seconds for no apparent reason. The performance issues have definitely been my biggest problem with these games, and at least in my girlfriend's case, she can't go more than an hour or two without getting a headache from how often the frame rate is changing. Aside from the performance issues, the only other thing I've really had a problem with is the camera occasionally clipping through the ground or into walls. While there are tons of videos showcasing just how buggy it can be playing with other people online, I haven't experienced anything like that yet. Also, while I was recording this, my girlfriend was playing Pokémon Violet and her game happened to crash. So you can just add game crashes to the list of issues that Pokémon Scarlet and Violet suffer from. Though luckily there is an autosave feature, so as long as you have that enabled, you shouldn't lose too much progress when your game crashes. So with all the technical issues I've experienced out of the way, let's get on to actually talking about what this game has to offer. Now, perhaps the most exciting aspect about Pokémon Scarlet and Violet is that it's the franchise's first jump into an open world. And if I'm being completely honest, so far I have found it a very underwhelming experience to explore, which is kind of what I had expected going into these games. Aside from all the visual performance issues that detract from the overall experience, there's nothing visually interesting to drive exploration in this world. Having explored a good chunk of the map so far, most of it consists of just flat and empty plains with no visually interesting landmarks to draw your attention. While exploring, I would either aimlessly walk around or follow the path to the next town. I haven't really had a moment where I just see something in the distance and need to go explore to see what it is. So while you can go almost anywhere once the tutorial ends, the world itself doesn't do a great job of encouraging you to explore it. The main motivation to get you to explore this world is to find the new Pokémon. But other than that, there is no variety of activities in the open world. While there are a myriad of items littered throughout the world, none of them really feel impactful when you discover them, and most of the items that are hidden throughout the world are just TMs to teach your Pokémon new moves, on top of the generic potions and healing items you will be finding throughout the world. The only other hidden things to discover are the new Pokémon called Gimmighoul's. They act sort of like Koroks from Breath of the Wild or Unknown from Legends Arceus. There are 2 different forms that you can discover. One form is hidden inside of chests and you can battle and capture them. The others are just standing around in hidden locations, and when you interact with them, they will give you some coins. And once you collect 999 of these coins, you can evolve the chest form of Gimmighoul. But those are the only sort of hidden collectibles scattered throughout the world. And if you don't really like Gimmighoul's design, then there's not really a point in trying to find all of these hidden Gimmighouls to collect their coins, unless you are trying to complete the Pokédex. I really think this world could have benefited from some sort of puzzles scattered throughout them, or like dungeons to explore. Because as it stands, the only thing to really do in this open world is fight wild Pokémon, catch wild Pokémon, battle trainers, or doing some of the raids. And, well, all of these things are just different variations on battling. So this world definitely needs more to it to actually encourage exploration. I mean, even the houses inside of all the cities are impossible to enter. The only buildings you can go into are the shops or story-related buildings. Now, let's move on to the Pokémon, as they are your main motivation to explore the world. So let's see how they managed to implement Pokémon into an open-world setting. Just like in Legends Arceus, Pokémon will appear in the overworld. However, the interactions available with these Pokémon are a huge step down compared to Legends Arceus. The first thing I noticed with wild Pokémon in this game is that they really aren't that aggressive. While Legends Arceus had the problem of some Pokémon being too aggressive, these Pokémon games go in the exact opposite direction. At least in my experience so far, it is very rare to actually encounter a Pokémon that will try to attack you. In fact, most Pokémon don't really react to your presence at all. Sometimes the wild Pokémon will walk up to your character and just stand in front of them, and very rarely some Pokémon will try and run away. Unfortunately, the most common behavior exhibited by most Pokémon is to just stand and stare at your character when they're in range. And to make matters worse, there really aren't a lot of interactions available with the wild Pokémon compared to Legends Arceus. You can no longer throw berries to Pokémon to try and distract them, and you can no longer catch Pokémon in the overworld. Instead, catching Pokémon works like all the older games where you have to first engage them in battle, and then just constantly throw Pokéballs from the battle screen. This means that the only engagements with wild Pokémon are to either battle them in the traditional way or use the brand new Let's Go mechanic, which lets you send one of your own Pokémon out into the overworld to attack wild Pokémon on the spot. And this new Let's Go mechanic is a huge improvement over traditional battles. This new mechanic lets you battle hordes of lower leveled wild Pokémon without having to actually engage them in battle yourself. But while you won't earn as much experience from battling this way, it will save you a lot of time over battling each Pokémon individually, as you will easily be able to take out hordes of wild Pokémon in the time it would take you to battle just one. Although if I'm being honest, the Let's Go mechanic makes it a little too easy to level up, if you understand your type advantages. Another downside is that your Pokémon won't evolve or learn new moves with experience they gain from the Let's Go mechanic. And evolving a Pokémon has gone back to how it worked in previous games, where you either have to level up in battle or use items that grant you experience to level up, instead of being able to select when your Pokémon will evolve once it reaches the proper level, like how it worked in Legends Arceus. Though thankfully these games retain the Legends Arceus move system, which allows you to edit your Pokémon's movesets at any time, and swap out moves your Pokémon had forgotten on the spot rather than having to find a move tutor to do it for you. Now as for Pokémon appearing in the overworld, the only issue I have with it is that some of the Pokémon are way too small and you will accidentally trigger battles that you don't intend to. And for me personally, I have been trying to avoid as many battles as possible, as they just feel way too slow and unrewarding in this game. The only time I will actually battle a wild Pokémon is if I intend to catch it, or if I need just a little bit of experience to level up a Pokémon to evolve it. It doesn't help that battles have reverted to how they were before Legends Arceus, and the whole strong style and agile style that was introduced in Legends Arceus has been completely removed from these games. It definitely feels like the pace of battles has been slowed down drastically compared to Legends Arceus. And it's also very annoying anytime a Pokémon gets a stat change, as they just take way too long to go through the animation for it and then tell you what's happening, as it's gone back to telling you what stat has changed one at a time, when it really feels like they could have streamlined this and had it tell you all the stat changes at once, rather than making you sit through each individual stat change, which just completely slows down the pace of battle. Now, another returning mechanic that I was really excited to see in these games was that Pokémon will follow you again. However, I found that they really missed the mark on implementing this feature in these games. While any Pokémon can follow you, I find that most of the Pokémon are just too slow to keep up with you, and once you get too far away from your Pokémon, they will return to their Pokéball until you manually let them out again. And so it's just not worth the effort to keep letting your Pokémon out, only for them to constantly fall behind. And so while I really love it when Pokémon follow you in games, it's just not worth it in these entries, as there's no way for it to make it so that your Pokémon always follows you and will just appear slightly behind you anytime they fall behind. However, there is also a new mechanic introduced that lets you play with all your Pokémon together. While you're in the open world, you can set up a picnic and release all of your Pokémon out to play. Here you can throw a ball for them to play with and make sandwiches, and these sandwiches will give you huge benefits while you're in the open world. They can do things like increase the experience you gain, make catching certain Pokémon easier, or allow you to encounter more of a certain type of Pokémon. And while I typically hate doing these sort of cooking mini-games, I found it very useful for encountering rare Pokémon. At one point, I had spent hours looking for a Toedscool, which is one of the new Pokémon introduced in this game, but had no luck ever encountering one. However, once I made a sandwich that made it more likely to encounter the type of Pokémon that Toedscool was, I immediately began finding them all over the place. So if you're having troubles encountering a certain Pokémon in an area that you know it should be in, just try making a sandwich and it should make it a lot easier to actually find the Pokémon you're looking for, even if you do have to endure one of the worst food eating animations in any game. So once you've spent some time in the world and found yourself a usable team, it's time for you to go out and experience the story. One of the key features being promoted about these games was that there were 3 separate stories for you to tackle. The first of which being the gym challenges, which any Pokémon player should be familiar with by now. Then there are the Team Star Raids, which is where you help to take down the evil team in this region. Finally, there are the Titan Pokémon battles, where you have to explore the world to find these very large Pokémon that must be defeated. So starting with the gym challenges, these work basically exactly as they have in every previous generation. There are 8 gyms in total, and you have to beat all of them in order to challenge the Pokémon League and become champion. However, before you can take on one of these gyms, you need to complete a gym challenge, and in my experience, these challenges have a wide variety to offer. One of them requires you to find a bunch of Sunflora scattered throughout a town and bring them back to a certain spot, and another one needs you to win a bidding war for one of the gym leaders. Once you complete the gym challenge, you can battle the gym leader and acquire their badge, and just like previous Pokémon games, the badges you have determine what level of Pokémon will listen to you. As for the Team Star Raids, throughout the region you will encounter Team Star bases that will blockade you from being able to progress. In order to get past these, you will need to challenge the base leader, but first you'll need to prove your strength by using the Let's Go mechanic to defeat a set amount of Pokémon within the base in a set amount of time. Once you do that, you will be able to challenge the Team Star boss to disband the base, allowing you to pass through it. Doing so will also unlock new TMs for you to teach your Pokémon. Finally, the Titan battles have you challenge a very large Pokémon in a set location in the overworld. These battles work almost like the alpha fights in Pokémon Legends Arceus, where they are just powered up versions of existing Pokémon. Overcoming these titanic Pokémon will unlock new abilities for your ride Pokémon, such as being able to swim or glide through the air. While I appreciate the effort of trying to have 3 separate stories in this game, I find that their elements work against the game's open-world nature. The biggest downside with these 3 stories is that none of the challenges will scale based on how many you have completed. Despite being able to access any of these challenges at any time, they do have an intended order, and it will be very hard to do them out of order since you will be severely underleveled. And on the flip side, if you do manage to overcome one of the higher level challenges, then you will just end up being overleveled for all of the challenges that you skipped. And when you go back to do them, they will be completely trivialized since their levels won't scale up to meet yours. Now, as far as the Team Star Raids and the Titan Pokémon go, I can understand why they wouldn't be scaled to the player level, as it wouldn't really make sense story-wise for the Team Star bosses and the Titan Pokémon to change levels based on the player. However, I absolutely believe that the gyms should scale based on how many badges you have when you challenge them. I do believe that the Pokémon anime has also shown that gym leaders have separate teams based on how many badges a challenger has, so why something like that couldn't have been implemented into these games is beyond me, as it really would have added more replayability to these games, as you could go back and try challenging the gyms in a different order, rather than having to challenge them in the order Game Freak wants you to do it in, as you will either be overleveled or underleveled if you try to deviate from their intended order. Now, as for the actual stories themselves, The gym challenges are what you expect from a typical Pokemon game. You just go around beating the gym leaders, and your rival will occasionally show up to cheer you on. The other two stories seem far more interesting. The Team Star raids expand on why the team was made to begin with, as this team is made up of a bunch of school dropouts from across the region. It also hints at a mysterious figure that all the members look up to and are awaiting the return of. Then the Titan Pokemon story has you searching for rare ingredients that the Titans are drawn to, and we end up helping some guy whose name I forget, as he wants to acquire these rare ingredients so he can feed them to a mysterious Pokemon. So overall, these stories aren't terrible, but Pokemon's also not known for its amazing storytelling. So I'll just have to wait and see where these stories go, to see if the payoff is actually worth it. But now, let's move on to the one thing I was most excited about in this new generation, that being the multiplayer. I was really excited when this was first shown off, as it would allow me and my girlfriend to play together throughout our adventure. So when we finally made it to the part where we could play together, I was shocked to see that Game Freak had only accomplished the absolute bare minimum when it came to this multiplayer mode. At the very least, I had expected that you'd be able to trade and battle with your friends while playing together, and perhaps take on trainers and wild Pokemon together. Unfortunately, there is absolutely no interaction between you and the people you are playing with beyond using emotes to communicate, and visiting each other's picnics to make sandwiches together. Beyond that, you just see the people you are playing with in the overworld. I found it ridiculous that you need to enter a completely separate menu in order to trade or battle, and then you have to send a code out to the friend that's already in your group. Like, there's no way to just walk up to one of the people you're playing with and push A to interact with them so that you can offer to trade or battle. No, you have to go to a different menu and then set up a group in the separate battle or trading menu so that you can trade or battle with the friends you are currently playing with. So while it is cool to play with your friends together, there's not really much to do, as you won't really be interacting with them at all, and the most you can do is just sort of follow each other throughout the world, or go separate ways and each explore separate areas of the map. But either way, I'd at least expected a little bit more effort to be put into the multiplayer aspect of this game. Yet, despite all of these flaws, I won't deny that I've been having a lot of fun exploring the Paldea region. Even with all of its technical shortcomings and underwhelming world, at the end of the day, this is still a Pokemon game. And if you have ever enjoyed playing Pokemon games, then you will likely have a great time playing this game, so long as you can look past the technical issues. While it is completely unacceptable for this game to have been released in the state that it's currently in, I think there was a solid foundation here, and given perhaps another year, this could have been the best Pokemon game ever released. Unfortunately, Pokemon's tight deadlines make it almost impossible to delay a game. I think that Nintendo, the Pokemon Company, and Game Freak all need to take a step back and reconsider what would be best for the Pokemon franchise going forward. Pokémon Scarlet and Violet are proof that there have been far too many games coming out in a short period of time, and that Game Freak is not capable of keeping up with the demand. We already had Pokémon Legends Arceus come out in January of this year, and now we have another mainline entry. And with them coming out within the same year, that means they would have been in development at the same time, which also means that Pokémon Scarlet and Violet would not be able to benefit from the additions included in Legends Arceus, as Game Freak wouldn't have known what the reception was to those mechanics in time to implement them into Scarlet and Violet. These games definitely would have benefited from being delayed, and seeing as they are the third Pokemon entries to release in the last 12 months, we really didn't need this generation of Pokemon to launch this year. So what it all comes down to with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is your tolerance for poor performance issues. These games are clearly incomplete, and yet this is one of the best Pokemon experiences released to date. While Game Freak definitely has a lot to learn in terms of making open worlds and optimizing for them, it's not entirely their fault that they don't have enough time, as they are clearly rushed in order to meet the holiday deadline. And that is what is most tragic about these games. They could have been amazing, but unfortunately, greed holds them back from realizing their true potential. And with these games selling over 10 million units in the first 3 days, making them the fastest selling console exclusives in history, it's unlikely that we're going to see any sort of change within Game Freak or the Pokemon Company, and that we will continue to see broken games released each year, or every other year, depending on how fast they can rush development. And that, perhaps, is the scariest thought, that no matter how broken Pokemon games are, they're always going to be bestsellers. And despite their broken state, it's still admittedly fun to play them. And while the massive success of Pokémon Scarlet and Violet's sales likely means that we won't see a change in the way Pokémon games are developed going forward, I hope that all of the bad publicity surrounding these games is enough to at least make the Pokémon Company and Nintendo reconsider the rate at which they've been releasing Pokémon games lately, or at least lend the license out to other studios who would actually be able to handle developing a Pokémon game of this scale, and allow Game Freak more time to work on their own Pokémon projects. That way they could still make a Pokémon game every year or every other year, but have different studios working on them so all the pressure doesn't fall on Game Freak to have a new game released every year or two.
Well, that about wraps up my first impressions on Pokémon Scarlet and Violet. Have you been enjoying your experience in the Paldea region so far, or did you decide to skip out on it entirely? Let me know in the comments, and until next time, thanks for watching.